Hi friends, welcome to the Ultra Origins series, where we hear from runners who recently finished their first ultra or completed a new distance. We're celebrating regular people who are doing hard things. There's a lot we can learn and be inspired by from people just like you. This series has been a long time in the making, and it came about for a couple of different reasons. First, I was inspired by a podcast series that was going on back when I finished my first ultra back in 2015. In that podcast series, runners would talk about having just completed their first ultra, and as somebody who was working towards my first ultra, I found it really inspiring to learn from regular people who had just finished doing something that I was working towards. And then fast forward to now, a lot of people have asked me how I got into ultra running and how I got into the 200-mile distance. And of course, I'm lucky to have this YouTube channel where I can share my stories. And so people had asked me how I got here, and I thought, well, I could share my story here. So the two ideas have come together. And in this new series, we're going to be talking to a lot of runners who have recently completed an ultra or a new distance. And the first episode is going to be with me as I recount my tale of how I got into running. While most of the videos in this series are going to be conversations between me and another runner, this video with me is just me telling you, the camera, my story, so it doesn't have the exact same format as what this series should be in the future. But I hope you enjoy hearing from me a little bit about how I got into running and got into longer and longer distances. And I look forward to sharing more stories with you from other runners in the future. So this is the new Ultra Origins series. I look forward to sharing it with you. Thank you for watching. In this video, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my history. I've had some questions over the last couple of years. People have wondered how I got into running and how I got into ultra running. And while I have shared my story quite a few times in podcast interviews, I have not made a video for my YouTube channel about how I got here. So I figured I would do my ultra origin story here on the channel and tell you about how I went from not running to having now completed 10 200-mile races plus a bunch of hundreds and lots of other ultras. It's been quite a journey for me. I certainly didn't expect when I started that I would have done so many races and so many long distance races. So anyway, yeah, let me just tell you a little about how I got here, and let's get into it. In high school, I ran cross country and track, and I actually considered myself to be a sprinter. I didn't necessarily like long distance running, but I did cross country to help keep me fit through the fall, and I did like the camaraderie of the cross country team. But when I got into college, I stopped running and focused or shifted my focus towards alcohol and drinking, as maybe a lot of college kids do. And then eventually I got out of college and kind of proceeded along that trajectory. As I got into adulthood and as I got into my working career, life became a lot more stressful. And I started to sort of fix that stress with even more alcohol. I drank myself into a stupor a lot of times. And as I kept drinking, all those calories started to really pack on my body, and I added quite a bit of weight. And so every once in a while, I would have a memory of wishing that I could get back into running. I kind of missed that from my youth. But because I was heavy, it was really difficult for me, and I would eventually give up almost as soon as I started because it was just so hard to do. But thankfully, at the end of 2007, thankfully maybe in quotes, I hit my bottom, my rock bottom, the time when I realized I needed help. And I checked myself into an alcohol recovery program. And by the beginning of 2008, I was done drinking alcohol. And thankfully, that alcohol recovery program that I went through was very successful for me, and I haven't had a drink since. I'm very proud of that. But that stopping drinking alcohol really helped me because the removal of all those extra calories helped me lose a bunch of weight. And I ended up losing a total of 70 pounds over a couple of years after I stopped drinking. In early 2012, I was interested in starting running again. And my friend Michael showed me that he had a new watch. He showed me his new Garmin GPS watch. And he showed me how he would record his runs and then share them to a website called Strava. And I was pretty excited about that. I've always loved technology, and in fact, ever since I was a kid, I've been really into watches, and watches laden with technology. I used to have like a calculator watch, and I had an FM radio watch. I was always interested in just these cool, cool technologies in watches. So when I saw this GPS watch, I thought, this is the shiny object that I need to kind of motivate me to get back into running. So I got myself a GPS watch, and I got myself a Strava account, and I recorded my first run on Strava on February 5th, 2012. I ran 2.2 miles. And for the next couple of years, I slowly ran more often. I even ran a couple 5K races. I didn't really have very much of a plan for my running, but I just thought that I would like to be able to be fit enough to run 5Ks every once in a while. And so I started to work towards that. In September of 2014, I actually set out to do a 5-mile run. And I ended up taking a wrong turn along the route, and I ended up going 7 miles. And somehow my friend Michelle learned about that. I can't remember how. Maybe she saw it on Strava or saw it on Facebook. I don't know. But she contacted me and she said, "Hey, Wes, if you can run 7 miles, you can run a half marathon. Would you like to run the Berkeley half marathon with me in November, 2 months ahead of when she messaged me?" And so I kind of just needed someone to invite me to do something like that. So I said, "Yeah, sure. I'd like to run a half marathon." So I started to train. I did a Hal Higdon training course that I found online. And in November of 2014, I ran the Berkeley half marathon in California. Now, I was still really new to all of this running stuff, and I really didn't know anything at all. One of the things I didn't know anything about was fueling, and so I actually did not eat breakfast the morning of the half marathon. I didn't fuel at all during the race, and when I got to mile 11 or 12, I really bonked and hit the wall, and those last 2 miles were a real struggle for me to get to the finish. But I did finish, and I remember just an incredible feeling of elation. I was so emotional when I got to the finish line. It was really an incredible feeling. I actually feel like I'm still chasing that feeling that I had from that very first run. I was so happy and also sad and exhilarated and exhausted. I felt great, even though I was in a bunch of pain, but it was quite an accomplishment. So from there, I decided I wanted to get better at running half marathons, and I also wanted to learn more. So I learned a little bit more about fueling, and I started to train for more half marathons so that I could get better. At the same time, after having some confidence from having run the half marathon, I joined a local workout group. And when I was there, I started to meet more local runners who I hadn't met before. And some of these guys had ultra experience. So this guy, Tony, that I met, he had run a few 100-milers. A runner named Kendall had run several 100-milers. And I just kept meeting new people in my life who made me believe that I could run an ultra too. So in 2015, I ran a couple more half marathons. And then in October of 2015, I ran my first ultra marathon, the Baker Lake 50K. And so this 50K is up north of the Seattle area. It's an out and back race, basically along a lake. Really, really beautiful. And when I got to the halfway point aid station, around mile 15-ish, my legs really started to cramp up. They hurt so bad. And an aid station volunteer asked me, how was I doing on my electrolytes? And it was one of those questions that kind of felt like a different language. I didn't even know what that meant. So while in my first half marathon, I didn't know anything about fueling, in my first ultra marathon, I didn't know anything about hydration. I had been drinking plenty of water, but I hadn't been replacing any of my electrolytes. So at that halfway point aid station, that's when I really started to cramp up. So the aid station volunteers gave me a little baggie of salt pills for me to take on the way back. And so as I was fighting cramps for the next 3 hours, I just kept popping salt pills trying to get back on top of my hydration. It hurt so bad. I just remember sometimes going up hills and just trudging through those last several miles, just in so much pain, but just feeling like I just got to get back to the finish. Anyway, eventually I did get back to the finish. I was really excited and really proud to get my first 50K behind me. Afterwards, I sat down and I ate some food, but I actually couldn't even walk for a short while. My legs hurt so bad. But I really was proud of the accomplishment of succeeding in finishing my first 50K. I was on quite a high after that ultra too. In fact, a friend of mine even suggested I could run a 100-miler with him in like 6 months' time from that. And so I jumped into training for what I thought would be my 100-miler in a few months. and just ran a bit too much and started to kind of almost overtrain. And a couple of months after the first 50K, I ran a second 50K on a paved rails to trail, so on pavement almost for 30 miles. And I was wearing very minimal shoes that didn't have hardly any cushion. And I ended up running so much on that really on my heels or on my ankles so hard on these minimal shoes that I injured the ankle. And within a couple of weeks after that run, my ankle was in pretty bad shape. And I ended up going to see a podiatrist who did some x-rays and discovered that I had really damaged the subtalar joint in my left foot. Anyway, it basically nixed any idea I have of any future ultras or any ultras in those next several months. So that 100-miler got canceled. And I basically wasn't able to run any ultras for about 6 months, or really wasn't able to run very much at all for 6 months as I recovered and did a bunch of exercises and got back on my feet. I really learned a lot about the need for proper footwear and proper equipment. I learned a lot about rest days, how important it is during training to take time off and let the body recover. And of course, during the time when I was recovering and kind of doing all my physical therapy, I learned a lot about patience, because I was so sad and so depressed to not be running. I loved running ultra. I had fallen in love with running so much, and I felt really good, and it helped my mental health so much. And not having access to that for a long time was really not great for me. But I was still, quite interested in getting back to that. So I did a couple Ragnar relays in 2016, but it wasn't until 2017 that I ran another ultra. During all this time, I was totally into learning more about ultra running, and I really wanted to do more of it. I was reading books about it. I was listening to podcasts about ultras, and I had heard people talk about, during these long races, that people would often enter a pain cave or just have some tremendous hardship during the race that they would push through and have some kind of spiritual experience at the end. And I really wanted that. That sounded really good to me. So in February 2018, I signed up for my first 100-mile race, the Mountain Lakes 100 in Oregon. The 100-mile race was in September of 2018, and in that spring and summer, I ran 2 50Ks and 1 100K, essentially as training runs. And in these races, I tested my gear and my nutrition and my hydration. And I also started studying the races before I ran them. Early on in some of my running, I wouldn't necessarily study the elevation profile or really take too close a look at the details of the race. I would just sort of experience the race as it hit me. But eventually I learned that it was, maybe it made more sense to sort of be educated about the run. So I started to look at elevation profiles. And what Mountain Lakes helped me do as I was getting ready for that was to also start to look at YouTube to learn more about the race. So I started watching race videos so that I could learn more about the terrain and learn more about exactly what the course was like and what the experience of running the race would be. And also, after I was watching all these race videos, I started to make a connection. I really like running, and it turns out I also really like making videos. My professional career started out as a video editor making TV commercials in the Seattle area. And as my career progressed, I actually moved into the software side, making tools for video editors. And in 2018, I wasn't making very many videos. I had kind of gotten away from my creative side as I was focused on my work, and I missed making stuff. So I decided that maybe it would be a good idea if I documented this journey to 100 miles. I didn't know if I was ever going to run 100 miles again. Certainly running 100 miles is a very special achievement and a very special occasion. So I decided I would document it. And my first running video of the Mountain Lakes 100 was shot with my phone. The quality wasn't very good. There was practically no stabilization on the video. But it really felt good to create something meaningful. And it's still a really special video for me to go back and watch to see what that journey was like. So I finished my first 100-miler in 23 hours and 22 minutes. And while it was extremely difficult and I did press through and I finished, I didn't have this emotional breakthrough at the finish line that I was hoping for. Part of me kind of expected something like the clouds to part and angels to sing when I crossed the finish line, but it didn't happen. I ran all day and I ran all night, and the next morning the sun came up, and a little bit after the sun came up, I crossed the finish line and the race was over, and part of me just wished I could keep going. I didn't have that emotional catharsis or that experience that I was really hoping for. Now, around the same time as I was training for my 100 miler, I was also seeing on social media that there were quite a few runners who were starting to get into the 200 mile distance. And I was quite intrigued by that. And I also felt like I was late to the 100 mile party. So many of my friends had already run multiple 100s by this point, and I decided I didn't want to wait for my friends to get ready to be able to run 200s so that I could run 200s with them. So I decided to jump at the 200 distance and see what that was like. So on January 8th of 2019, I registered for the Moab 240, which will be run in October of 2019. So I was really excited to follow in the footsteps of the runners that I admired on social media and try this new distance myself. And I trained like crazy. I had a coach by this point. I had hired a coach in 2017 when I was getting ready for my first 50 miler. And so the coach and I worked together and made a plan for how we would get to 240. And I signed up for a number of races to use as long training runs. So in 2019, I ran 2 50Ks, 1 50 miler, 100K, 100 miler. I also did a 75-mile section on the Pacific Crest Trail that I did over 2 days to practice running with a loaded pack and also to practice sleeping on the ground. I also paced a friend for about 48 miles at the Bigfoot 200. And then another friend I paced during the Tahoe 200 for about 60 miles. As I had never been in a 200-mile race before, I found that the experiences of being a pacer and feeling the vibe of a 200 firsthand was invaluable. It was really great preparation, and I'm really glad that I did that. I also started to make more race videos in 2019. I documented all of those ultras that I used as my training runs, and I really started to improve my videos that I was making, and I started to grow my YouTube channel. And that was pretty exciting to start to just share all these runs that I was doing and get back into my creative storytelling self. So as I was getting ready for Moab, I did all my usual prep. I trained really hard and I did all the other races. I studied YouTube videos of the previous Moab races, as well as studying maps and race reports from the previous years. I did everything that I could to build my confidence and trust that I would be able to finish the race. And so I loaded up on an enormous amount of gear, and I traveled to Moab in October of 2019 for my first attempt at a 200 miler. The morning of the race, I remember standing at the starting line, and with just minutes until we would start, I felt unusually calm. I knew that I had prepared as well as I could. I had a plan, and even though I knew that things weren't going to go exactly to plan, I knew that things would eventually break down, and the plan would fail, and then we would have to start to adjust. I was ready for that. And so for 4 days, I ran, hiked, and sometimes hobbled around the Utah desert, up and over mountains, sometimes going over 10,000 feet in elevation. Around a mile 120, about halfway through, during a steep climb up to the Shea Mountain aid station, I ended up injuring a hamstring. And so for the next 120 miles, I ended up having to push through this pain and to sort of change my plans because it really, really hurt to run. It didn't hurt to hike. I was able to power hike and walk pretty well. And so I was even able to keep a pretty decent pace doing that. But anytime I tried to switch to running, my legs just hurt too bad. So I ended up hiking for a couple of days. But over time, I actually started to heal a little bit too. And by the end of my race, I was actually able to do some light running again. I was really impressed with how the body's able to heal in the midst of a 200. My parents were there to support me. My 3 best running friends drove from Seattle to pace me in the second half of the race. Leah was able to pace me from the very last section from Porcupine Rim to the finish line. It was just an amazing experience to have so much support from my friends and family. Such an amazing experience to be able to finish this thing in just over 4 days. So 4 days and 2.5 later, I crossed the finish line, and I was extremely proud of this achievement. And I kind of had the spiritual experience that I was looking for, but I didn't achieve it or didn't feel it the way I thought that I would. I feel like the big aha that I felt, or like the realization, was that Given proper training and planning, especially with support from loved ones, and barring any injury that could possibly happen, there's almost no limit to what we can achieve. I felt like even though that day I had finished 240 miles, if I wanted to, I could set out and do longer distances. It felt like with all this support and stuff that what we're capable of, we haven't even found the end of yet. And so it really motivated me to want to continue to do more of these kinds of events. That was my big sort of angel singing moment, was just like, oh my gosh, wow, look how powerful as runners we are. And I am too, just a guy trying hard, working hard, but able to finish a 240-mile difficult loop around Moab, Utah. I made a video of this race too. It was by far my most ambitious to date. I was able to have my crew shoot video during the aid stations, and I had a GoPro by then that I was running with. And after the race, immediately after Moab, I wasn't able to finish the video for quite some time. I had some unrelated medical issues after the race that resulted in a few surgeries. And just because of a whole bunch of life stuff that was going on then, I wasn't able to start actually editing the video until the spring of 2020. And soon after the video was released, the YouTube algorithm actually started to recommend my video to all kinds of people, not just runners, but lots of regular people around the world started to get suggested my Moab video. And so over the course of a very short time, a lot of people, sometimes thousands of people a day, were watching the video. And of course, this was during COVID lockdown time. So a lot of people were stuck at home watching YouTube videos. And it was pretty exciting that all of a sudden I was getting so many comments and so much feedback from this video. That was it was really motivating to me and really special feeling too. And to this day, that video of my Moab 240 run is my most watched video on my channel. It's just been quite remarkable how that video has been able to be seen by so many people. And it brought a lot of people to the channel who then subscribed, and it eventually, helped my channel really grow. Now, the reason why I chose the Moab 240 as my first 200 was, I think at the time, I wasn't necessarily thinking of it as my first 200. I was just thinking of it as my 200. I didn't expect that I would ever run another one after that. So as I was looking at the time, I was kind of basically considering Bigfoot, Tahoe, or Moab. Which of the three would I do as my 200? And since I live in the Pacific Northwest, I felt like the Bigfoot course was kind of something that I was familiar with. I'd seen things like that before. I'd been in that area. Tahoe didn't feel that foreign to me, but Moab kind of felt like a different planet. And also I kind of liked the idea of going the furthest distance I could, 240 miles versus just 200 miles. So I chose to do Moab for those reasons. But also, while I was researching the 200s and researching Moab to get ready for it myself, I had watched Kerry Ward's videos on YouTube, and they had been really inspiring. And one of the things I liked was that he had actually done inaugural races. And I was really interested to know, how does somebody find out about an inaugural race? Of course, there was a long time where I wasn't involved in the running community, so there was no way I would have known about it anyway. But after having done Moab, I started to be a bit connected with the ultra running world. And so I started to hear in 2019 about a new race that would be coming to Arizona in 2020 called the Cocodona 250. And so I thought, oh, great, this will be my chance to do an inaugural race. And I got pretty excited about that. Of course, Cocodona didn't end up happening in 2020. But when registration opened for it to happen in 2021, I jumped at it. And I was really excited to be a part of the inaugural Cocodona 250. So the 2021 Cocodona became my second 200-mile finish, and it really confirmed how much I enjoy the distance and being out there for so long. The experience of running a 200 is just so difficult and so life-changing that I really felt amazing to finish another one. I also felt like after having finished two 200s that I had found something that I was kind of good at. I mean, I wasn't winning these races, or even being in the top 10 or whatever. But I was finishing the races and finishing them fairly well, and I was just loving the experience. Also, of course, I made a video of that Cocodona video, and so I had one of the first few videos that were available in 2021 about Cocodona, and so that also kind of helped my channel grow as people started to look at this new race. A lot of people were watching my channel, and that also was really motivating for me to be able to share the experience with a lot of other people. So, having fallen in love with 200s, in 2022, I decided I was going to go back to Cocodona because I wanted to see how the race was going to change after its inaugural run. But then after some encouragement from my daughter, I also signed up to do the Triple Crown of 200s with Destination Trail. So in 2022, I was going to do 4 200s, and they were going to be pretty epic. The whole experience was incredible. Having done it all, I was so impressed with how resilient our bodies can be. Over the course of the year, I felt like I got stronger with each race, and each time I did one of these races, my recovery actually got better and got easier. And that was an incredible thing to sort of learn, that over these races, I wasn't deteriorating, but I was actually improving. Just a remarkable thing to discover and to experience. Of course, 2022 Cocodona had a reroute due to a fire, so I decided I was going to go back to Cocodona again in 2023. So I did it a third time, and then I also ran the inaugural Oregon 200. I really enjoyed doing the inaugural Cocodona, and so when I learned about the opportunity to do another inaugural, the Oregon 200 was great to do. It was put on by the same company who did Mountain Lakes 100, my first 100 miler. So I was excited to run their inaugural 200-mile race in Oregon. And then in October of 2023, Dave Stinchfield joined me to run a course that I designed around the Puget Sound. I called it the Puget Sound 200, and mostly a road race. And it was interesting, and I think that Dave sometimes regrets that he did that with me. But I had a great time running that with him. And the way that I bounced back from that run was also really impressive to me. So this year, in 2024, I did Cocodona for the 4th time, joining the Cocodona 1,000 Mile Club. And this is now my 10th 200. And I'm just so impressed with just my whole experience with this whole thing, how my body keeps holding up. Now, one thing about Cocodona this year was it was a lot harder than the previous times. Something about this year has been harder for me. I've been kind of tired all year. So I was tired going into Cocodona. I was tired during Cocodona. And my recovery this year has been harder. But it's just been the whole journey of all these races and getting into 200s and being able to share them all on YouTube has been quite an incredible journey for me. I feel really blessed to be able to do all this and to share it with friends and also just sort of like have this platform of this channel, which I never expected really to have. It's been just an organic thing that has grown, and I'm really happy to sort of go along for the ride and share all this with friends like you. I think the 200s have shown me that I'm really quite strong and that I can push through a lot of discomfort for a long time. I've gotten a lot of confidence running these 200s and also just confidence in ways that help me in real life too. I suffer a lot of imposter syndrome, a lot of confidence problems. Sometimes I quite profoundly dislike myself in not very nice ways. But ultra running teaches me ways that I can cope with real life. And the whole idea of sometimes of just one foot in front of the other, you don't necessarily have to finish in the top, but you just have to finish, and you can take your time. Aphorisms like forward is a gear, or just relentless forward progress. All these things that ultra runners tell themselves, one foot in front of the other, just one step at a time, you'll get there. Those kinds of things really help me in life, and I'm so thankful that I am taking all these learnings that I'm learning from the trail and being able to apply them into my life. So that's my journey into ultra running and into 200s. I've learned so much. I've forgotten a lot of it too, and then relearned it again sometimes. All the while, I've met some really cool people, and all the friends and relationships that I've met along the way have really enhanced my journey. And this channel has enhanced my journey. I thank all of you for the comments that you've given me on all my various videos. I really feel like I have some sort of virtual friends out there, and I'm so grateful to your support. You really do give me a lot of motivation, and I enjoy sharing my journey with you. So that's how I went from being a regular guy who drank too much to a guy who's now finished 10 200s and is looking to do more. I still feel like I'm just a regular guy. I'm working really hard to make all this happen. Sometimes I feel overwhelmed by the amount of projects that I keep giving myself. But I'm really thankful to you for helping me through this and giving me a project to do. And yeah, so thank you for following my journey and thank you for being a part of it. I hope that this has been interesting, and I hope that maybe it motivates some of you to know that you too can do impossible things. You too are very strong. And I look forward to meeting you out there on the trail. All right, thanks for watching.